In the quiet outskirts of Aburi, where the hills breathed mist every morning and cocoa trees lined the red earth roads, lived a boy named Kweku Mensah. At 12 years old, Kweku knew laughter before he knew fear. His world was warm, orderly, and full of promise. His father, Nana Kwame Mensah, was a respected businessman in Accra, wealthy, disciplined, and deeply principled. Though money flowed easily into their home, arrogance never did. Nana Mensah believed wealth was a responsibility, not a crown. He often said, "If your success does not lift others, it will one day bury you." Kweku's mother, Serwaa Mensah, was the gentler pillar of the family. She ran charities quietly, without cameras or praise, ensuring widows had food, children had books, and clinics had medicine. She sang as she worked, and Kweku learned early that kindness could be powerful without being loud. Every month without fail, the family traveled to their ancestral village near Akwapim to visit Kweku's grandmother, Nana Essie. She was a well-known philanthropist, using her old but sturdy house as both a small school and a healing post. By day, children sat on wooden benches learning to read. By night, the sick lay on mats as herbs simmered and prayers were whispered. Kweku loved those visits most. He played football barefoot with village children, shared kenki wrapped in banana leaves, and watched his parents distribute supplies books, mosquito nets, sacks of rice without expecting gratitude. His grandmother always placed her hand on his head and said, "You are growing inside goodness. Guard it." Often traveling with them was Mr. Kojo Ansah, his father's secretary. To the world, Kojo was loyal, efficient, almost invisible. Nana Mensah trusted him deeply. He handled schedules, documents, and meetings chosen deliberately as a man of modest presence, so temptation would never threaten his marriage. To Kweku, Uncle Kojo was just another adult, quiet and respectful, always standing a step behind his father. At home in Accra, Kweku lived a structured life. Morning lessons, evening reading, weekends spent learning chess with his father or helping his mother pack donation boxes. He had no reason to shout, no reason to hate. Anger was something he barely understood. On his 12th birthday, beneath fairy lights strung across their garden, Nana Mensah lifted his son onto his shoulders and said, "One day, you will build things that outlive me." The guests laughed. Serwaa wiped her eyes. Nana Essie smiled knowingly. None of them saw the shadow standing just beyond the light. None of them knew this was the last season of peace. As Kweku grew older, the Mensah household became a quiet symbol of order and trust in Accra. Their home in East Legon was not the loud kind of rich, no gold gates, no excess, but it was always open. Elders came for counsel, young men for work, women for support. Nana Kwame Mensah believed a man's strength was proven by how many people felt safe around him. At the center of the household's rhythm was Mr. Kojo Ansah, the secretary. He arrived before sunrise and left after sunset, his files always neat, his tone always respectful. He called Nana Mensah sir even when no one else was around. To outsiders, Kojo looked like the definition of loyalty. But loyalty, when mixed with envy, can rot quietly. Kojo knew everything: meeting schedules, private routes, cash movements, weaknesses. He watched Nana Mensah command rooms without raising his voice, watched contracts bend in his favor, watched respect follow him effortlessly. Kojo wrote the letters, arranged the calls, but never tasted the power himself. Kweku liked Kojo in the innocent way, children like adults who smile politely. Sometimes Kojo brought him books from abroad, engineering magazines, puzzles, small mechanical kits. Nana Mensah praised this, saying, "Seek knowledge shared multiplies." Kweku didn't notice the way Kojo's smile tightened whenever such praise was given. On weekends, the family often returned to the village. Nana Essie's compound bustled with live children reciting alphabets, women lining up for medicine, men repairing broken benches. Nana Mensah funded new chalkboards and water tanks. Serwaa taught the girls basic hygiene and reading. Kweku helped wherever he could, carrying water, sweeping classrooms, listening wide-eyed to village stories by firelight. His grandmother watched him closely, pride soft in her eyes. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, Nana Mensah sat with Kojo under the mango tree, discussing expansion plans, new factories, new jobs. Kojo nodded, writing everything down. But inside him, something hardened. He realized then that Nana Mensah trusted him completely, trusted him more than guards, more than drivers, more than distant relatives. And trust, Kojo understood, was the easiest door to unlock. That night, as Kweku slept peacefully between his parents after a long day of laughter, a future began forming quietly, one built not on love, but on calculation. The boy dreamed of machines and bridges. The man nearby dreamed of a throne. Kweku turned 13 with the curiosity of a boy who believed the world was fair. His days were filled with school, books, and the small experiments his father encouraged, taking apart radios, sketching bridges, asking endless questions. Nana Mensah never dismissed them. Understanding begins with asking, he always said. Business expanded quickly. New contracts arrived from Temakumasi, even beyond Ghana's borders. Nana Mensah's company became known not just for profit, but for fair wages and clean records. Workers were paid on time. Safety rules were enforced. That reputation made him powerful, and it made him dangerous to men who wanted shortcuts. Kojo Ansah watched all of it from his desk. He noticed how Nana Mensah followed routines faithfully. Morning prayer, same route to the office on Tuesdays, evening meetings on Thursdays. Kojo memorized these patterns without writing them down. He learned which guards grew careless, which drivers liked bribes, which accountants complained quietly about their salaries. At the village, Nana Essie began planning a permanent clinic. Serwaa sourced beds and supplies. Nana Mensah promised to fund the building himself. When the villagers heard, they danced. Drums echoed into the night. Kojo clapped along smiling, but later, alone in his room, he stared at his reflection and whispered, "All of this could be mine." It began small. He delayed payments deliberately, then solved the problem himself to appear indispensable. He leaked minor information to rival businessmen, then returned with warnings that made Nana Mensah rely on him even more. Each step fed his confidence. Each success convinced him he deserved more. Kweku once overheard his parents speaking late at night. Kwame Mensah said softly, "Power attracts envy." Nana Mensah laughed. "Envy only wins when you feed it fear." Kojo heard that too, and he learned something important. Nana Mensah believed fear was weakness. That belief became Kojo's weapon. One afternoon, as rain poured heavily, Kojo drove Nana Mensah home himself. Traffic slowed. The city groaned under thunder. Kojo's hands were steady on the wheel, but his mind raced. He imagined sitting in the big chair, giving orders, being called sir at the back seat. Kweku hummed quietly, unaware that the man driving them had already begun measuring the cost of blood against the weight of power. That night, Kojo made his first call. Not to a friend, not to a family member, but to a man who didn't ask names, only prices. Beneath the success, beneath the charity, beneath the laughter of a boy who still trusted the world, the soil began to shift. And once the ground moves, nothing built on it remains untouched. The day began like any other, warm and slow, with Accra waking under a pale sun. Kweku stayed home from school. His mother had promised they would review his science project together once she returned from town. He sat at the dining table, pencils spread out, humming softly. By noon, the house felt unusually quiet. Serwaa checked her phone again and again. Nana Mensah's call should have come by now. His trips were always brief, his habits precise. She tried Kojo's number. It rang unanswered. A strange heaviness settled in her chest. Across the city, events unfolded with terrifying speed. The car Nana Mensah rode and slowed at a junction it had crossed safely hundreds of times before. Another vehicle blocked the road. Voices were raised. Doors were forced open. There was shouting, then confusion, then violence that left no room for mercy. Nana Mensah never begged. Not far behind, Serwaa, traveling separately after a last-minute errand, found herself caught in the same net. The men were efficient, cold, practiced. They left nothing behind but silence and broken plans. By evening, police cars filled the street outside the Mensah home. Kweku stood frozen as unfamiliar faces spoke words that did not make sense. Accident, investigation, tragic. His ears rang. His heart pounded too loudly for him to hear his own thoughts. Serwaa was gone. Nana Kwame Mensah was gone. His world ended in front of him. Through the crowd, Kweku saw Kojo arrive late, his face carefully arranged into grief. He knelt, clasped his hands, shook his head in disbelief. He placed a comforting hand on Kweku's shoulder. "I'm so sorry, my boy," Kojo said softly. Kweku did not respond. His eyes were fixed on nothing. That night, Kweku did not sleep. Every sound felt like an echo of something lost. Every shadow felt like a threat. He replayed his last moments with his parents again and again, searching for a warning he might have missed. Far away, Kojo washed his hands thoroughly, over and over. In the days that followed, news spread quickly. A respected businessman and his wife dead under mysterious circumstances, the company placed under emergency management, assets frozen for investigation. Kojo stepped forward to help. He attended meetings, spoke to lawyers, protected the business, promised stability. And while the city mourned and a boy's childhood collapsed into ash, Kojo Ansah quietly began signing documents that transferred power into his own hands. Kweku attended the funerals in silence, dressed in black that felt too heavy for his small frame. As the coffins were lowered into the earth, something inside him hardened. Grief did not pass through him, it stayed. And where grief stayed too long, something darker began to grow. After the burial, time did not heal Kweku Mensah. It distorted him. The house that once echoed with laughter became a place of careful footsteps and whispered voices. Relatives came and went, offering condolences that sounded rehearsed. Some stayed too long, others left too quickly. Everyone looked at Kweku with pity, and he learned to hate that look more than loneliness itself. At first he cried. He cried at night, silently, pressing his face into his pillow so no one would hear. He cried when he saw his mother's cooking pots untouched. He cried when he passed his father's study and smelled old paper and cologne. But slowly, almost without noticing, the tears stopped coming. And when they stopped, anger took their place. Kojo remained close, too close. He arranged legal matters, spoke with banks, handled protective custody of assets. Adults praised him for stepping up. They said Kweku was lucky to have such a man around. Kweku listened, and remembered. He remembered missed calls, delayed arrivals, the cold look he had once felt and dismissed. At school, the change was immediate. Kweku fought boys bigger than him. He spoke sharply to teachers. He broke things when frustrated. When punished, he showed no remorse, only a steady, burning stare that unsettled adults. The counselors said he was traumatized. They were right, but not completely. Trauma bent him inward. Anger sharpened him outward. One afternoon, Kojo tried to speak to him gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. Kweku shrugged it off violently. "Don't touch me," he said. Kojo froze. Just for a moment, then he smiled thinly. "I'm only trying to help." But Kweku no longer believed in help. The final decision came quietly. Kweku would leave Accra and go live with his grandmother in the village. It was framed as healing, fresh air, stability, tradition. Nana Essie arrived herself to take him. She looked smaller than Kweku remembered, but her eyes were still strong. When she hugged him, he did not pull away, but he did not return the embrace either. "You are safe with me," she whispered. But safety does not mean forgetting. As the car drove away from the city, Kweku watched the buildings fade into dust and green. He felt no relief, only distance. That night in his grandmother's house, the same house that served as a school, a clinic, a shelter, Kweku lay awake listening to crickets and distant drums. For the first time since the deaths, the air felt real again. Nana Essie prayed beside him before sleeping. "Pain can either rot the heart," she said softly, "or prepare it." Kweku stared into the dark, fists clenched. He did not yet know which one he was becoming, but one thing was certain. The boy who laughed easily was gone. In his place stood something unfinished, waiting. Village life moved at a slower rhythm, but Kweku's mind did not slow with it. Each morning roosters crowed and children gathered in his grandmother's compound for lessons. Each evening the sick arrived quietly, hoping Nana Essie's herbs and care would ease their pain. Life continued steady, purposeful. Kweku watched it all from a distance. At first he kept to himself. He spoke little, answered questions sharply, and avoided other children. The anger inside him had no direction, yet it lashed out blindly. He fought boys who mocked him. He snapped at elders and was punished without complaint. His fists became quicker than his words. Nana Essie did not scold him. Instead, she gave him work. He swept the compound before dawn, washed bowls used to feed patients, fetched water from the stream until his arms burned. When he finished one task, another waited. There was no room for idleness, no space for rage to explode. At night, exhausted, Kweku slept deeply for the first time in months. Slowly, something changed. The work did not erase his anger, but it contained it. Like fire placed inside a kiln, it grew hotter, more controlled. Nana Essie spoke to him rarely, but when she did, her words stayed. "Anger is energy," she said once. "Grinding herbs. Untrained, it destroys. Trained, it builds or kills." Kweku didn't respond, but he listened. One afternoon, a traveling radio broadcast carried news from Accra. Kweku froze when he heard familiar names. His father's company, now under new leadership, Kojo Ansah, praised for saving thousands of jobs. The rage surged again. That night, Kweku broke a wooden stool with his bare hands. Nana Essie watched without stopping him. When he finished, shaking, she said quietly, "Revenge that comes too early kills the wrong person." From that day on, Kweku changed his focus. He read obsessively math, physics, mechanics, anything that gave structure to his thoughts. He helped teach younger children. He repaired broken furniture and radios. His intelligence surfaced sharply, unmistakably. Villagers began to notice. "He is troubled," they said, "but he is gifted." Nana Essie began setting aside money, carefully hidden gold, savings from her deceased son. Donations meant not for herself but for Kweku's future. She told no one. "Pain should not leave you empty-handed," she said. Kweku did not yet know her plans, but for the first time since his parents' deaths, he felt something close to purpose forming beneath the anger. Not forgiveness, preparation. By the time Kweku turned 16, the village no longer saw him as the angry city boy. They saw him as Nana Essie's grandson, quiet, disciplined, and unsettlingly sharp for his age. He woke before dawn without being told. He worked without complaint. He learned faster than anyone else, but inside him, the fire never went out. Each chore became a lesson in control. Sweeping taught patience, fetching water taught endurance, caring for the sick taught restraint, how to touch pain without being consumed by it. Nana Essie never praised him openly, but she watched closely, correcting him with a look, approving with silence. At night, she sometimes told stories, not fairy tales, but histories. Stories of men who rose too fast and fell harder. Stories of revenge that poisoned entire families. Stories of wisdom that outlived violence. Kweku listened, storing every word like ammunition. School inspectors eventually noticed him. His test scores were impossible to ignore. He solved problems meant for students years ahead of him, often explaining the logic more clearly than his teachers. When asked how he learned so quickly, he simply said, "I don't waste time." Letters began arriving, first from regional schools, then from national programs. Nana Essie read them alone, her hands trembling not with fear, but gratitude. She thanked God quietly each night. Meanwhile, news from Accra continued to leak into the village like poison through water. Kojo Ansah had fully taken control of Nana Mensah's company. Investigations faded. Assets were restructured. Politicians appeared beside him at events. He spoke confidently about integrity and progress. Kweku listened to these broadcasts without expression. But later, alone, he would clench his fists until his nails cut skin. One evening, Nana Essie found him repairing a broken generator by lantern light. "You want to leave?" she said calmly. "Yes," he replied, "but not to run." She nodded. "Good. Running only makes the past chase you harder." That night, she opened a wooden chest hidden beneath her bed. Inside were gold ornaments, documents, savings, everything she had preserved since her son's death. "This is not for comfort," she told him. "It is for direction." For the first time, he bowed deeply before her. "I will not waste it," he said. In that moment, the village realized something important without saying it aloud. This boy was no longer just surviving his past. He was shaping himself for something ahead. And far away, in offices built on stolen foundations, Kojo Ansah smiled for cameras, unaware that the child he thought broken was becoming dangerously whole. The letter arrived on a hot afternoon, carried by a motorbike courier whose dust trail announced importance before the envelope was even handed over. Nana Essie took it with steady hands, though her heart pounded hard enough to be felt in her ears. She read it once, then again. Kweku stood across from her, expression unreadable. "You are being offered a full scholarship," she said finally. "Engineering. Abroad." The word abroad hung between them like a doorway opening into the unknown. Kweku felt pride, but it was muted. Heavy leaving felt like betrayal. This village, this house, this woman had rebuilt him from fragments, yet he knew staying forever would turn discipline into stagnation. That evening the village gathered. Teachers spoke of his brilliance. Elders prayed for protection. Children stared at him as if he were already something legendary. Nana Essie said little. Later, alone, she handed him a small leather-bound notebook. "Write everything," she told him. Anger grows dangerous when it stays unspoken. On the night before his departure, Kweku walked the compound one last time. The classroom benches he had repaired. The clinic doorway he had painted. The tree where children played. This place had saved him, but it had also contained him. At the bus station the next morning, Nana Essie embraced him tightly. "Remember," she whispered, "education gives you power, but character decides how you use it." Kweku nodded. As the bus pulled away, he did not cry. He stared straight ahead, mind already calculating distances, systems, futures. He promised himself he would return not as a wounded boy, but as a man prepared for whatever truth awaited him. Far away, Kojo Ansah stood before reporters, announcing his intention to enter politics. He spoke of justice, reform, and national growth. Applause followed him like a shadow. Kweku did not see that broadcast, but destiny had already begun tightening the thread between them. The door behind Kweku closed softly. The one ahead opened wide. The first winter Kweku experienced abroad was cruel in a way heat never was. The cold cut through layers of clothing and into memory. Snow fell quietly, endlessly, covering everything: roads, roofs, even sound. It reminded him of grief, how it arrived loud at first, then settled into a silence that never truly left. University life was demanding, but it suited him. Engineering gave his mind something precise to hold on to. Equations behaved honestly. Materials failed only when rules were broken. Unlike people, systems could be trusted if you understood them well enough. Kweku excelled. Lecturers noticed his intensity immediately. He asked few questions but submitted work that showed frightening depth. While others complained about workload, Kweku stayed in labs late into the night, driven not by ambition alone but by something darker, an unspoken need to stay busy so his thoughts would not turn inward. Still, the past followed him. He avoided friendships at first. When classmates joked, he stayed quiet. When challenged, his temper surfaced sharply, catching people off guard. A single careless insult once ended with a broken chair and a formal warning from the department. He didn't argue, he didn't apologize, he simply withdrew further. Phone calls with Nana Essie became his only anchor. Her voice crossed oceans effortlessly. "Do not punish the world for wounds it didn't give you," she told him gently. "I am learning," he replied. It was the closest thing to a promise he could manage. Awards came despite everything. Academic excellence, innovation prizes, research grants. His name began appearing on notice boards and faculty newsletters. Nana Essie kept every letter, every certificate sent home, showing them proudly to villagers who shook their heads in disbelief. "Our grandson is building the future," she said. Kweku sent money home whenever he could, not out of obligation but gratitude. Yet at night, alone in his small dorm room, anger still stirred. He dreamed of his parents, often sometimes smiling, sometimes silent. He woke with clenched fists, heart racing. He told himself he had buried the past. But buried things, he would later learn, do not stay quiet forever. By his third year, Kweku Mensah had become a name people recognized before they saw his face. Professors cited his work in lectures. Research teams requested him specifically. He earned internships that students twice his age competed for and lost. On the surface, he was everything success promised. Inside, he was still at war. The more he achieved, the more distant he became. Praise made him uncomfortable. Celebration felt undeserved. When classmates spoke of families visiting for graduation, something cold tightened in his chest. He avoided those conversations entirely. During a summer internship, a senior engineer once asked him, half joking, "What drives you like this?" Kweku paused too long before answering. "Efficiency," he said finally. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Late one night, after receiving another award, he opened a leather-bound notebook Nana Essie had given him years ago. Pages filled with formulas and sketches gave way to words raw, uneven, written during sleepless nights. "If I stop moving, I feel them. If I stop thinking, I remember." He closed the book quickly, as if it could accuse him. News from home reached him in fragments. Nana Essie's health was weakening, though her voice remained strong. The village clinic she built was fully operational now, staffed by trained nurses. She spoke proudly of it, never mentioning the pain in her legs or the long nights she spent awake. And then came the broadcast. Kweku was studying in the common room when a television nearby flashed a familiar face, older, sharper, confident, Kojo Ansah. The words "presidential aspirant" scrolled beneath the image. Kweku's breath caught, the room faded. Applause echoed from the screen as Kojo spoke of integrity, reform, and justice. He smiled the same practiced smile, the same calm voice. Kweku stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly against the floor. Students stared. He didn't care. That night, the anger he had buried for years broke through its restraints. He paced until dawn. Memories replaying with cruel clarity missed calls, late arrivals, the hand on his shoulder at the funeral. The past had not disappeared. It had been waiting, and now it had found him again. Kweku did not sleep for 3 nights after seeing Kojo Ansah on the screen. He replayed the broadcast endlessly in his mind, the confidence, the applause, the lies dressed in fine words. The same man who had stood beside police cars pretending to grieve now spoke of justice to an entire nation. Something inside Kweku snapped back into place. All the discipline his grandmother had taught him, all the years of silence and restraint, suddenly felt like preparation for this moment. The anger he had trained so carefully was no longer wild. It was focused. He skipped lectures, ignored emails. His professors noticed immediately. When one finally confronted him, Kweku listened politely. Naughty Dan walked away. For the first time, his achievements felt irrelevant. He called Nana Essie. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice warm but tired. "You saw him," she said, not asking. Yes, there was a long silence between them. "Do not let hate choose your path," she said quietly. "It always demands more than it gives." Kweku closed his eyes. What if justice demands sacrifice? Another pause, heavier this time. "Then make sure it is yourself you are willing to lose," she replied. The call ended, but her words stayed. In the days that followed, Kweku began researching not emotionally, but methodically. He studied Kojo's rise, the companies he now controlled, the allies who stood beside him. Patterns emerged. Financial trails, old scandals buried under influence. The engineer in him took over. He realized something chilling. Kojo had not just stolen his father's life, he had stolen his legacy and rebuilt it in his own image. Graduation came quietly. Kweku stood among hundreds, applause washing over him without meaning. His grandmother watched through a grainy video call, tears in her eyes. "I am proud of you," she said. For a brief moment, doubt pierced him. Then he remembered the coffins, the silence, the lies. That night alone, Kweku made a decision not in anger, but with terrifying calm. He would go home, not as a grieving child, not as a gifted student, but as a man who understood systems, power, and weakness. And whatever the cost, he would bring the truth down with him if he had to. Kweku returned to Ghana under a bright, forgiving sky, the kind that made the city look innocent from above. From the airplane window, Accra spread out beneath him in familiar patterns of roads, rooftops, and movement. For a moment, he felt the old warmth rise in his chest. This was home. At Kotoka International Airport, Nana Essie waited in a wheelchair, smaller than he remembered, but unmistakably herself. When she saw him, her face broke into a smile that carried years of prayers. "My engineer," she whispered as he knelt before her. He hugged her gently, afraid his strength might harm her fragile frame. For a brief while, the rage inside him quieted. He carried her home, listened to village gossip, laughed softly at stories that reminded him of who he used to be. The village celebrated his return. Drums sounded, children followed him everywhere, calling his name. Elders spoke of pride and destiny. Kweku smiled, but it was a controlled smile. At night, when the house slept, he turned on the television. Campaign rallies filled the screen. Kojo Ansah stood taller now, wrapped in kente, surrounded by guards and praising us. His voice was firm, confident, crafted. Kweku felt the fire return immediately. He began moving carefully, reconnecting with old contacts, visiting former company workers his father had trusted, listening more than speaking. Everywhere he went, Kojo's influence was visible. Money, fear, loyalty bought cheaply. One evening, Nana Essie found Kweku sitting alone in the old classroom, staring at nothing. "You came back carrying joy," she said, "but something else walked in with you." Kweku didn't deny it. "He took everything," he said quietly, "and now he wants the country." Nana Essie closed her eyes. Power built on blood never sleeps peacefully. Neither did Kweku. He began attending public lectures, business forums, political discussions, never speaking, always observing. He mapped allies and enemies the way he once mapped machines. What he did not realize yet was that he was standing at the edge of a path Nana Essie had always feared, a path that only went one way. Kweku's days began to divide themselves neatly into two lives. By morning, he was the returning success story, the engineer who spoke at youth programs, advised small startups, and helped repair broken systems at the village clinic. People admired him openly now. They asked for guidance. They trusted him. By night, he became someone else. He sat with notebooks spread across the table, drawing networks instead of machines, lines connecting companies to shell accounts, donors to politicians, favors to silence. He revisited old files from his father's business, comparing them with public records. Discrepancies appeared like hairline fractures. The engineer's mind loved patterns. The son's heart hated what they revealed. Kojo Ansah's campaign was not built on vision alone. It was built on leverage. Kweku learned who feared exposure, who owed money, who had histories that could be reopened. He did not act yet. He only collected information like energy. Was most dangerous when stored. Nana Essie noticed the change before anyone else. "You walk like someone carrying a heavy load," she said one evening as he helped her to bed. "I am only tired," Kweku replied. She studied him for a long moment. "Tiredness rests," she said. "Obsession does not." That night, Kweku dreamed of his parents standing on opposite sides of a river. He tried to reach them, but the ground beneath him turned to mud. When he woke, his heart was racing. Still, he did not stop. At a public forum in Accra, he finally saw Kojo in person for the first time in years. The man was broader now, his hair touched with gray, his presence commanding. Cameras loved him, crowds responded to his voice. Kojo spoke of corruption as if it were an enemy he had always fought. Kweku stood at the back of the hall, unseen. For a moment, just a moment, their eyes met. Kojo's smile faltered. Recognition passed between them like a blade. That night, Kweku understood something important. This was no longer just about exposing a lie. Kojo would never fall by accident. He would only fall if pushed from every side at once. And to do that, Kweku would need more than intelligence, more than patience. He would need allies who did not fear darkness. As he left the hall, a stranger brushed past him and whispered, almost casually, "If you are looking for power beyond rules, there are doors not listed on any map." Kweku did not turn around, but he memorized the voice. The message followed Kweku for days. He heard it in the silence between conversations, in the low hum of traffic, in the pauses before sleep. Doors not listed on any map. The words irritated him not because they tempted him, but because they suggested something he hated, shortcuts. And yet, every path he calculated ended the same way. Kojo Ansah was protected by wealth, loyalty purchased in bulk, and fear layered carefully over the truth. Courts could be delayed. Witnesses could disappear. Evidence could be buried beneath procedure. Kweku's logic kept circling back to a single conclusion. The system would never touch him unless the system itself was shaken. The stranger found him again without trying. It happened at dusk, near a busy transport station. The man sat beside Kweku on a bench as if they were old friends. He wore plain clothes, his face forgettable in a way that felt deliberate. "You think to clean," the man said softly. "That's why you're losing." "I'm not losing," Kweku replied without looking at him. The man smiled. "Not yet." They spoke in fragments. No names, no promises. The man talked about influence that moved beneath politics, money that didn't pass through banks, loyalty that didn't rely on speeches, fear that traveled faster than law. "This isn't magic," the man said, anticipating Kweku's thoughts. "It's human nature. Pressure applied in the right places." Kweku stood to leave. "You can walk away," the man continued, "or you can learn where the weight really is." That night, Kweku argued with himself more fiercely than he ever had with anyone else. He remembered Nana Essie's lessons, discipline, restraint, dignity. He remembered his father's belief in fairness, but he also remembered coffins and applause. In the end, he told himself a lie that sounded like reason. "I will only listen." The place he was taken 2 days later was not dramatic. No chanting, no spectacle, just a quiet compound on the edge of the city where men spoke plainly about consequences. They showed him how money moved through shadows, how alliances were enforced, how fear could be engineered without a single blow being struck. Power, he learned, was not loud. It was patient. Kweku did not commit to anything that day, but when he left, he felt something shift inside him, a line crossed. Thin but permanent. At home, Nana Essie watched him closely. "You have gone somewhere," she said. "I can see it." Kweku met her gaze, steady and unreadable. "I'm still here," he said, but for the first time it wasn't entirely true. Kweku tried to keep the two worlds separate. By day, he repaired water pumps, advised youth groups, and sat beside Nana Essie as she oversaw the clinic. Villagers still saw the disciplined engineer, the grandson who had returned with knowledge and humility. By night, he learned pressure. It began with favors that sounded harmless, introductions made quietly, meetings arranged without records, information passed from one phone to another. No threats, no blood. Just leverage applied gently, then steadily increased. He discovered how easily fear hid behind politeness. A contractor withdrew support from Kojo's campaign after a private conversation. A journalist delayed a story after receiving a reminder of an old mistake. Donations shifted directions without explanation. Small things, but they added up. Kweku told himself this was still justice, still balanced, still controlled. The men he dealt with never rushed him. They spoke in probabilities, not promises. If you pull here, something moves there. They taught him how to wait. But waiting has a cost. Sleep abandoned him again. His temper sharpened. When Nana Essie asked simple questions, he answered too quickly, too sharply. He began missing evening prayers. The house felt colder, though the nights were warm. One afternoon, Nana Essie called him to sit. "You are changing the world," she said gently. "But you are losing yourself to do it." Kweku looked away. "Sacrifice is necessary. Sacrifice chosen is different from sacrifice demanded," she replied. Her words struck him harder than any accusation. For a moment, doubt flooded in. He considered stopping, walking away before the lines blurred any further. Then the news broke. Kojo Ansah's polling numbers surged. Rallies grew larger. Endorsements followed. The system absorbed every tremor Kweku caused and adjusted stronger, tighter. Rage returned, hot and humiliating. That night, Kweku went back to the quiet compound on the city's edge. This time he didn't just listen. "I need more weight," he said. The men exchanged glances, not surprised. "Only measuring weight costs," one of them replied. "And it always comes due." Kweku nodded. At home, Nana Essie prayed longer than usual. She sensed the storm gathering, the way old trees do before the wind arrives, and somewhere deep inside Kweku, beneath logic, beneath planning, something darker took root, the belief that anything that stood between him and Kojo's fall was no longer innocent, not even love. The demand came without ceremony. One of the men met Kweku at dawn, his voice calm, almost respectful. "You want real weight," he said. "Then you must prove you are not ruled by what you love." Kweku understood immediately. "No," he said. The word left his mouth before thought could soften it. The man did not argue. He simply listed consequences, alliances that would vanish, protections that would dissolve, doors that would close forever. Then he said the final thing, the cruelest truth of all. Everyone has a wall. We only work with men who are willing to break theirs. That night Kweku sat alone in the classroom where he had once taught children to read. The chalkboard still held faded equations. His hands trembled not with fear, but with the effort of resisting himself. He told himself he would refuse. He told himself he would find another way. But the image of Kojo's smile of applause built on stolen blood rose again, suffocating doubt. When he returned home, Nana Essie was waiting, seated by the window, wrapped in her shawl. "You look like a man carrying a lie," she said gently. Something inside Kweku shattered. He raised his voice first. Accusations that made no sense. Anger that had waited years for release. Nana Essie stood slowly, confusion turning to hurt. "Kweku," she said, reaching for him. He struck her once, then again. She was fully clothed. There was nothing theatrical about it, tonally, the raw, unbearable ugliness of violence turning inward. Nana Essie fell, shielding her face, not screaming, only whispering his name the way she had when he was a child afraid of storms. Kweku stopped. The room spun. His chest felt hollow, carved out. He backed away as if from a stranger, hands shaking, bile rising in his throat. Nana Essie lay still, breathing shallowly, her eyes open not in anger, but sorrow so deep it felt like judgment. "I raised you better than this," she said quietly. He ran by morning. The men had what they wanted, proof, leverage, a soul marked beyond return. Kweku did not go back inside the house. He did not speak to anyone. News of the incident spread quickly, then was buried just as quickly, smothered by influence and silence. From that day on, the doors opened, but the cost followed him everywhere. At night, he heard her voice, not accusing, remembering, and he knew no matter what happened next there would be no absolution waiting at the end of his path. After that night, Kweku Mensah no longer hesitated. The doors that had once been closed to him now opened without question. Phone calls were returned immediately. Meetings happened in hours instead of weeks. Men who once spoke carefully now spoke plainly. He had proven something terrible and undeniable. Nothing human restrained him anymore. Power flowed not like wealth, but like permission. Information surfaced that had been buried for years. Financial records leaked at precise moments. Rival factions within Kojo Ansah's circle began turning on one another, each convinced the other had betrayed them. Campaign donors withdrew suddenly, citing personal reasons. Allies disappeared from public view. Kojo felt it before he understood it. His speeches grew sharper, his smile strained. He began replacing trusted aides with new ones, then replacing those too. Paranoia crept into his voice during interviews. The press noticed. Whispers spread. Something is wrong. Someone is pulling strings. Kweku never appeared publicly. He moved like a shadow between actions, never present long enough to be named. He watched consequences unfold from quiet rooms, eyes hollow, hands steady. The system, once unshakable, began to fracture. A key witness resurfaced, protected long enough to speak. A former enforcer broke under pressure and told his story. Documents tied directly to Kojo's rise leaked to international media, too big to bury. The country watched in disbelief as the image of integrity collapsed. Kojo Ansah went from frontrunner to suspect in days. Police warrants followed. Raids, seizures, allies fled. The man who had once engineered deaths with surgical calm now looked hunted, aging rapidly, eyes darting, voice shaking. When Kojo was finally arrested, Kweku felt nothing, no relief, no victory, only a numb certainty that something inside him had already died. But power is never clean. As investigations widened, Kweku's name surfaced not publicly at first, but in quiet rooms where deals were broken and new enemies were made. The same networks that had lifted him now prepared to discard him. One night, as sirens echoed faintly in the distance, Kweku stood alone and understood the final truth. He had not beaten the system. He had become part of it, and systems always collect their debt. Kweku Mensah was arrested at dawn. There was no dramatic chase, no final speech, just a knock firm inevitably, and men with warrants that carried the weight of everything he had done and everything he had enabled. He did not resist. He did not ask questions. He simply stood, hands steady, eyes empty. The news broke quickly. Kojo Ansah disgraced and awaiting trial for conspiracy, murder, and corruption. Kweku Mensah, brilliant engineer, exposed as a silent architect behind the collapse. The public struggled to understand how both truths could exist in the same story. In prison, time lost meaning. Days blurred into nights. The power that once answered his calls evaporated instantly. Men who had sworn loyalty vanished. Silence returned, but this time it was unforgiving. Kweku lasted 6 months. Some said it was illness. Others said it was despair. No official explanation satisfied anyone. He died without confession, without absolution. He never knew that during those months, a woman far away carried his child. His girlfriend, quiet, steady, untouched by his darker dealings, gave birth to a son after his death. She spoke of Kweku only as a brilliant man, a kind mentor, a builder. She never spoke of revenge. Years passed. The boy grew up hearing stories of a father who loved knowledge, who believed in systems and structure, who helped others rise. Nana Essie's name lived on through the clinic she built, restored by the community that refused to let her legacy die. The boy inherited no blood-stained power, only intellect, curiosity, and a quiet grace. He became an engineer too, and in doing so, he proved something. Kweku never lived long enough to learn that lineage is not defined by the worst thing a man does, but by what survives him when the fire goes out. They buried Kweku Mensah without ceremony. No crowds gathered. No speeches were given. His name passed through the news cycle quickly, folded into headlines about corruption, justice, and tragedy. Some remembered him as a fallen genius. Others remembered only the damage left behind. Most moved on. But endings are rarely final. Years later, a boy stood at the edge of the old village compound where a school and clinic still shared the same walls. He was tall for his age, quiet, observant. The villagers knew him simply as Mensah's son, though few could explain why they spoke the name with softened voices. He had never met his father. What he knew came from stories carefully chosen about intelligence, discipline, generosity, about a man who built things, who believed systems mattered, who loved learning. No one spoke to him of rage or violence or the price his father paid, and that silence was intentional. The boy excelled naturally. Numbers made sense to him, structures fascinated him. He asked questions that startled teachers and fixed problems others accepted as permanent. When asked where he learned such patience, he shrugged. "My grandmother taught me," his mother would say, meaning Nana Essie, whose portrait still hung in the clinic hallway. The clinic thrived. The school expanded. The village remembered Nana Essie, not for how she suffered, but for how she gave. Her legacy outlived every headline, every crime, every failure. One afternoon, the boy found an old notebook tucked inside a wooden chest, pages filled with equations, designs, and unfinished ideas. On the first page, written in careful handwriting, were the words, "Build something that lasts longer than anger." The boy closed the book gently. He would become an engineer, just as his father had. But where his father had tried to tear the world apart to balance it, the son chose to repair. And in that choice, quiet, deliberate, unwavering, the cycle finally ended.